nobody's perfect, gamers included, and I think that we all know that there is stuff that we don't do completely right every time, or maybe even any time. I don't know. But I really want to talk about some of those mistakes, because I know I'm not the only one. Hi folks, it's Falcon, and today on Gameranx, 15 mistakes every gamer has made. Let's just get right into it. Number 15, killing yourself with your own explosives. Don't even pretend. I'm gonna say it right here. You know what I am talking about. You're in a shootout, you see a bunch of guys clumped together, so you're like, hey, I could throw a grenade, and that would end this post-haste. Because you speak like that. So you aim the grenade, throw it, it hits a wall, falls at your feet, and shortly thereafter, you are a fine red mist. It's embarrassing, but you know what's even worse? Explosive barrels. They're completely static things, most of the time. But it seems like we're always finding ways to accidentally off ourselves with them. This one's going way back, but some of the most deadly explosive barrels ever were in GoldenEye on the Nintendo 64. Those things did way more damage at a longer range than they looked. And let's face it, GoldenEye's controls, though innovative at the time, made it pretty easy to blunder into them like an idiot. And no shame here, everybody does it. It doesn't matter what game we're talking about. Eventually, if you have the ability to interact with explosives, you're going to blow yourself up. Like, why be careful with explosives, right? And number 14, accidentally making the wrong choice in a game with dialogue options. There's lots of games with dialogue choices these days, and sometimes making the wrong choice can have pretty drastic consequences. Most of the time it doesn't, and that's when people often make mistakes. They get complacent, get used to the dialogue choices not mattering. So an odd choice comes up that does matter, and you're just mashing through the text too fast and hit the wrong opinion, and wow, suddenly that lady I was trying to romance hates me. Whoopsie doodles. There's two types of load that are potentially relevant here, and the one that is now necessary is loading a save file, because after saying that, it ain't gonna be the other one. I mean, it's obviously not always about, romance choices. Usually, in fact, it's not. Things are actually potentially a lot more consequential than that. And, especially when you're getting near the end of the game, you might not really fully be reading the explanation for the choices. Certain choices in RPGs can have massive repercussions, but also RPGs can be pretty long-winded, and you've been pretty used to skipping as much dialogue as possible by this point, so you may just pick the wrong choice and, get the wrong ending. Sometimes making the wrong choice in this type of situation is a minor inconvenience at best, but sometimes, you can just let the villain get away with destroying the world. And number 13, wandering into an endgame area when you're just starting the game out. In a game where the difficulty's all divided up, and it's kind of inevitable that this is going to happen at some point because a lot of games are like this. But you start up a game, you pick what direction you're going to go into, maybe at random because you don't really know what you're doing or where you're going. You got the freedom. It's an open world, And the first enemy you see just absolutely wipes the floor with you. And it can be really demoralizing, because that first impression is that the game is just gonna be really super friggin' hard. And, some people don't even realize there is an intended path. And also there's this, when they put really high-level enemies into the starting areas just to kind of make the game feel scarier, like the world feel more hostile towards the player. Sometimes you can't really tell how tough enemies are supposed to be in the start of the game, so maybe this is how all the enemies are. And I'm not talking about people who intentionally go into high-level zones. There's plenty of sensible strategies involving exploring high-level locations in games. I mean the moments where you're just woefully unprepared and you have no idea what the hell you're doing. You bumble into this epic level encounter that you're meant to fight 100 hours later. We've all done it. And number 12, dodging off of a cliff. When Wile E. Coyote does something that he thinks is clever and then realizes, he's about to fall to his doom because he's just looked down and there is nothing underneath him? Yeah, if a game's got a dodge button, you're going to do the same thing at some point. Except, the cartoon timing on the fall is probably not applicable. Some games go a little easier on you, put some kind of invisible wall around cliffs so you can't by mistake, but most don't. Doesn't matter how careful you are, how much you've learned in the area, and know what you're doing with that dodge. There's going to come a point where you're not thinking or you're acting in a panic. You dodge and whoops, falling down the cliff now. Just the regular old video game mistake of walking off a ledge isn't quite as spectacular. More of an honest mistake, but when you dodge into a death drop, it feels way worse. You're making a mistake the second you hit the button, and then you gotta watch, in agony as your guy slowly rolls down to oblivion. Bastard dodge button. At number 11 is The Accidental Murderer. Game gives you a gun. This is something that's going to happen to you at some point, you know? Like the old adage goes, when you've got a hammer, everything looks like a nail. So when you mostly interact through the world in a game by shooting, eventually you're going to shoot the wrong guy. In FPS games, the worst you can get is a game over, but in more open world games like Red Dead or Grand Theft Auto, the consequences can be a lot more annoying. Shooting somebody by mistake in GTA, A, you're going to get a wanted star, and B, that person may have been necessary to finish the mission. Generally, you can start the mission over, but yeah. Red Dead 2 is even worse, partially because of how it works, just in general. I don't think there's a person alive who has played this game and hasn't accidentally shot somebody in it. Like the unique control scheme takes a lot of getting used to, and sometimes when you want to talk to somebody, it's easy to just, unload a bullet into their face. And obviously always happens at the worst possible time, so you got to deal with bounty hunters who are only going to go away if you take the time to lose them and then pay off your bounty, which is annoying and time consuming. If you're playing video games, it's inevitable you're going to be an accidental murderer at some point. Or hey, maybe you're a psycho and you just like killing innocent people. I don't know. At number 10, and this is going to be one you feel, backtracking by mistake. It does not get much more annoying than when you're playing a mostly linear game, and instead of making consistent forward progress, you end up backtracking. Like you turned yourself around somewhere and, oh, hey, this looks familiar. The level design's pretty repetitive. It's not repetitive at all. I'm just back at the start. And you get mixed up because of the level layout or a cutscene or a random battle. Something left you a little confused. Nowadays, games are a little better about giving players tools to make it a little more obvious where they have and haven't been. But that doesn't stop people from making this mistake. It hasn't stopped me, at very least. And it's such a waste of time. You get out of an arena, you start walking, and you notice, oh man, I just wasted 30 minutes. And that gets really old after a while, especially when you've been playing a game that doesn't have a lot of landmarks to tell areas apart. Usually it's on us when we start going backwards, to be completely truthful. It's a mistake we make because we're not paying enough attention. It's really annoying, but at least with most modern games, it's generally our fault. Doesn't stop us, but yeah. At number 9, getting stuck on an easy puzzle. Oh my god, this is something I do so much, and it makes me so mad. Like, you play a game with a light puzzle focus, like any single-player game, like Uncharted or whatever. They all have puzzles in them, and they're not the hardest puzzles in the world. But you get to one, and it takes an unnecessarily long amount of time to solve because, I don't know, maybe you're getting sleepy, maybe it's a brain fart, you're just oriented towards some other type of puzzle, or the environmental context makes you think, like, that can't possibly be the solution. And it's the solution. And like, these are not moderately tough puzzles we're talking about, the kind where you get like a eureka moment and everything comes into place. This is something that's just profoundly unsatisfying because it's something where you go, oh, I really should have noticed that. And you just get mad at yourself for not solving it already. And like, especially with ones where you forget some specific context sensitive item or a button combo you're supposed to use. You get hyper focused on some specific element to the puzzle and you don't notice the other part. I don't know. There's dozens of reasons why we fail at like toddler level puzzles. And it's super embarrassing, and I think we're basically more upset with ourselves than anything else. And it's fortunate nobody's watching. Nobody's watching, right? You get up and you look around, make sure nobody's standing in the door. At least nobody was watching. At number 8, trying to punch a gunman. It's a stupid mistake that everybody makes every once in a while. You got melee combat, you got gun combat. It's your choice, whether it's the simple Halo melee stuff to the little bit more complex Uncharted close range system. Basically, everybody just wants to pull off a John Wick move from time to time, you know? You don't just want to be a chump hiding behind some waist-high cover, taking little pot shots at enemies from a distance. You want to be cool. You want to run on walls, do jump kicks, and go, ow, it's just like the Matrix. Sweet. But in a lot of games, these kinds of attacks are more of a liability than anything else. Unless you really know what you're doing, most of the time you just end up running at a guy and he unloads his machine gun at you and you die. Or you might get one guy, but the one guy isn't the only guy and the other guy also has a gun and he shot you the whole time you were getting the first guy. Cruel reality is that most of us are not John Wick, and 90% of the time you try to do something really cool, you end up getting killed. Even if like you got a great move set, you're not John Wick. Unless you've been practicing like crazy, you probably are not John Wick. But it's also really hard to resist looking really cool when you do pull it off. And it happens sometimes. That's when you look around to see if somebody's watching because you want somebody to be watching. But generally you don't want somebody to be watching because generally that doesn't happen. At number 7, no backups making big problems for you. Yeah, let's say you're playing like The Witcher 3, okay? Or any other big RPG. You get to the end and it's a bad ending. So, I guess I'm going to go back and get the real ending. All I have to do is make the correct dialogue options for certain moments in the story. But here's the problem. You got to save right before the end and want about 50 hours back. And that's it. It's one of those mistakes we're all going to make from time to time. You get really absorbed in a game and you stop really thinking about backup saves. But unless you're obsessed with making sure you have backup saves, you're probably going to mess up and not backup save at some point. So you're stuck with restarting the game or giving up and just watching a long play on YouTube to see what you missed. Like, it just plain sucks when a bad save locks you out of doing what you actually want to do in the game. One of those really understandable mistakes, because seriously, who wants to make dozens of save files for every game? I mean, it's not really that consoles have, relatively speaking, a small amount of space on them compared to how they used to, but games take up way more space, and it runs out pretty quick. At number 6, not opening the parachute. Parachutes, they suck. They drive me nuts in games, and I bet a lot of other people out there probably had the same problem. Seems like every game has a different method for opening the parachute, and because of that, I always screw it up at least once. Not so much in the Just Cause games where you're used to the parachute pretty much all the time, but like Grand Theft Auto or something like Far Cry, the parachute's not even like consistent across titles in the series. So easy to forget which button you're supposed to press to activate it, and half the time I end up falling to my death at some pivotal moment when you're supposed to be doing something cool, like with a big airplane or something. I don't know. It's like, just throw up a big button prompt so I don't die. Yes, I realize that is holding my hand, and I don't always want that, but here I do. There is not a standard parachute thing in any control scheme. At number 5, going for a stealth kill, but you're too late. This is so aggravating. You can make a lot of mistakes in stealth games, in all seriousness, and those mistakes often cost you pretty big. It's usually not a quick death and a restart. Usually you have to run and hide somewhere and wait for enemies to stop hunting you when you're caught, but that doesn't stop it from physically hurting when you do it. Like, you spot the perfect opportunity to strike, and the guy turns around, like, at the second you're about to do it, and just unloads. Yeah, you can maybe get away, but, like, either way, your pride is certainly harmed here. And it doesn't matter how forgiving or clueless a game makes its guards, it's gonna happen. Always seems to happen at the last second. You're creeping up on a guy, everything's falling into place, and then right as you're about to strike, this dude turns around and is like, oh, I see you. Like, even if you're good at stealth games and played them for years, it's still one of those mistakes you're always going to make. It's obvious and stupid, and often happens simply because you weren't paying attention to the frequency that, you know, the character's going to move around or turn around, whatever, but it just keeps happening anyways. And number 4 is getting stuck on a jump. Say you're platforming in a game, everything's going great. You're the freaking climbing and jumping king, and then you hit it, the jump. The one that, for some reason, you can't get. You died dozens of times trying. Nobody else seems like they're having problems, but for whatever reason, it's just not happening for you. Play a game with platforming, and you know what we're talking about. It's that stupid jump you keep making the same mistake on every single time, where your motor system seems like it's just rebelling against you. Like, you know exactly what you're supposed to do, but you can't do it. For whatever reason, it just will not happen. Maybe it's nerves, maybe it's stress, but that stupid jump just keeps killing you no matter how much you try. And if anything, you actually get worse at it, even though you understand it more. And I'm not talking about like impossible jumps here. I'm talking about these unnoteworthy jumps that you're just like not able to do for whatever reason. At number 3, pressing the wrong button because of muscle memory, and oh, this is going to happen to everybody. Back in previous generations, video game controls were really all over the place. You could really never be sure exactly what button did what in a game, and a lot of games would mix things up specifically to be different, not because it made sense. These days, controls are a lot more standardized. Almost every FPS mimics COD's control scheme, and honestly, that's probably for the best. Certainly, there's little nuances, and games feel different, but generally, you're not like in the middle of the gaming control wilderness without a map. And it's like this because when a game does come along that has its own unique controls, it leads to tons of mistakes. Might be a dumb example, but perfect entry here. Grabbing walls in Jedi Fallen Order. Very few games make you press a trigger to grab a wall. It's very weird. In literally every other game, it's one of the face buttons, but you gotta tap a trigger here, and I screw up every time. It's stupid, but that's muscle memory. And once I get used to it, if I play another game where you can grab the wall, and I come back, oh hey, Jedi Fallen Order it's another language. It's Mandarin Chinese as a control scheme. And number 2 is carrying too much junk. There's so many RPGs where you are a glorified garbage man, collecting all the trash you can get your hands on to satisfy your inner hoarder. It can be tempting to grab everything that's not nailed down, but this goes from standard video game behavior to a time-consuming mistake when you start having too much stuff. And take any Bethesda game with a weight system. You've probably hit the point where you can't let some special piece of loot go, and you're forced to slowly walk around the wasteland to the nearest vendor or your home so you can unload some stuff because you're crazy over encumbered. It's a miserable experience you could have avoided if you didn't make the mistake of keeping your inventory nearly full at all times, but can we help ourselves? I don't think so. They design it so that we're going to do that. That's their fault, not mine. Right? Right? And finally, at number 1, pressing start when you're supposed to press select, or pressing select when you're supposed to press start. Ultimate mistake right here. Doesn't matter how long you've been playing a game, 1 hour, 10 hours, 100 hours, half the time, when you want to open up the map, you open the options instead. I mean, I still play Breath of the Wild, and in the lead up to Tears of the Kingdom, I've been playing it more. And oh my God, I do this just about every single time I'm trying to select one of the special abilities or set a waypoint or what. I press the wrong button every time. I press that screenshot button on the Switch all the time. But like with start and select, they're 2 buttons that have nearly identical functions. They're right beside each other most of the time, and nobody really seems to agree on exactly what either does. Start button might be inventory and the map, select for options, but they switch it up, and it's never 100% clear, regardless of how used to any game you get. It's a small and very inconsequential mistake to make, but after a while, it gets crazy annoying. And I realize that I am on the older end of the gamer generation, but I don't think it's just me. I'm pretty sure everybody looks senile when they're trying to press map, because it never does map. Why doesn't it do map? It does stuff. It doesn't do map. I didn't press stuff, I pressed map. Oh, and now that I want stuff, it's map. What is screenshot? Ah! And that's all for today. Leave us a comment. Let us know what you think. If you like this video, click like. If you're not subscribed, now's a great time to do so. We upload brand new videos every day of the week. Best way to see them first is, of course, a subscription, so click subscribe. Don't forget to enable notifications. And as always, we thank you very much for watching this video. I'm Falcon. You can follow me on Twitter at Falcon the Hero. We'll see you next time right here on Gameranx.